And joining me on the podcast and on videos, Ian James, CEO of Silverbullet Data Services, and that's SBDS ticker. Ian, thanks for joining me.
Absolute pleasure, Justin. Lovely to see you as always.
Yeah, and even as well, some good news recently, a big contract renewal and a capital facility. We'll talk about that in a bit. Before we do, just before we get into, your share price is getting a bit of a knock today, and people, I think, confusing what's happening. It is confusing for people outside the industry. It's very confusing because it's changed. Everyone thought it's going down the deprecation of cookies, but it's moving it forward. But it's not in the way people are seeing it. But anyway, before we get into that, Ian, just for people not familiar with the company, just explain what Silverbullet do, please.
Yeah, so Silverbullet is a business that we describe as a customer experience company. What that means is that we help big brands. Some of our notable brands that we work with are Heineken, Mars, Sony, and others, big multinational companies that are going through the process of transforming their marketing organizations and indeed their business around the smart use of data, customer data, to improve the return on investment for their marketing expenditure. So getting better bang for their buck, if you like, in terms of being able to sell more product and engage with more customers in a meaningful way. That manifests in a couple of ways. We have human expertise, if you like. So human expertise that help those clients to deploy new marketing and advertising technologies. That can often manifest as big global rollouts of platforms like Salesforce, or another one called Treasure Data, which are characterized as customer data platforms. So we help brands to adopt those platforms to manage and store data. And then we help them after that implementation piece to utilize that data in a meaningful way. So we work with them hands on keyboards to help them to deploy that data in marketing campaigns. So that's part of what we do. We've also developed our own products. And one of our flagship products is a product called 4D AI, which is an AI-driven tool which effectively reads the content of websites or the context of websites, enabling us to pull that up into what we call segments or targetable consumer groups, which is using privacy-first data, so data that's not related to cookies, which we'll come to, but it is all the data that we can read from websites that then we match to the needs of those customer segments and present ads in a more meaningful and indeed a better environment that's going to get better bang for that advertising dollar. So we have a mix of products and services which we deploy, but fundamentally we're about a privacy-first customer experience company using data to get better marketing ROI for big brands.
Yeah, and that's key. So privacy first, because that's the way the internet is moving. Browsers are moving. For a long time, companies have used data without users' consent, and because it's still sort of a new era. It's a new time for advertising online. Still, it's infancy really. Last 10, 20 years. And so now people become aware that, hang on, these companies are using my data, all of my data, and I haven't said anything whether they can use it or not. So everything's catching up, regulations catching up, saying this shouldn't be allowed. You should treat people's data like it's their own. And so we're moving towards what's called deprecating the third-party cookie. And I know sort of Apple Safari and Mozilla's Firefox have done that, and they respect people's privacy. Google's sort of big elephant in the room, been dragging its feet for a while, but they come up with an update. So explain this, because I didn't really get what was happening. And just share price took a bit of a knock. That what's happening? So
I think it can be confusing, and it is a complex space. Hence why we exist, really, because it's complex for everybody in the entire ecosystem, for our clients, consumers, for investors. And therefore, sometimes I think it's important to take a step back and just look at the whole picture and say, okay, what's going on, rather than focusing on one specific issue, which in this case is, as you're describing, the deprecation of the third-party cookie by Google. So third-party cookie is the little data device that's dropped on your browser that tracks you around the web and gives Google, via the ownership of the browser, which in this case is called Chrome. So if you use a Google Chrome browser, you get a little cookie dropped onto your browser every time you go online, and it measures and looks at where you've been on the web in order to segment you up into certain types of user groups for advertising to be effective. Now, most people have not given clear permission for that third-party cookie to be used by a plethora of different users of that data, not just Google, but all the different users, the third parties that will be using that data to present ads to you. And often if you've had that experience of being stalked around the web, that's a very good example of where that data is misused, where you haven't given consent, but an advertiser, probably very innocently, is using that data in order to track you around the web. So that is not compliant with GDPR. And that's why Google have been setting about, and the whole industry is setting about, the deprecation of the third-party cookie. Now, it's not that simple. Unfortunately, it's very challenging to do that because the cookie is such a big part of the whole ecosystem. It's been there for 20 odd years, and therefore a lot of infrastructure is built around it on the publisher side, so all the websites, as well as the advertiser side in terms of targeting ads. So the deprecation of the cookie is also an issue for regulators because in all of this mix are consumers. And consumers, as you say, now their expectation is that their data is properly permissioned, and they have an understanding of that now. The market and the world has moved on, and folk have a very clear understanding of what their rights are in terms of privacy. So deprecation was one route of doing that by Google. What they've come out with today is saying is they're not going to deprecate the cookie. You're going to take a different route to providing privacy safe browsing environments. And their suggestion is that they will look to do pretty similarly, actually. An easy comparable is what Apple have already done. When we've spoken before, and we speak about this a lot to our clients and to the industry, is Apple have set the bar very high in terms of, in fact, they go as far as to say that privacy is a fundamental human right. And whenever you're on Safari, which is Apple's browser, or of course in the Apple ecosystem on your mobile device, then by proxy, by design, then you have to consent to be tracked. You have to ask to be tracked. Therefore, Apple have already done that. As you said, there are other browsers in the market like Mozilla and Firefox and so forth. So more than half the market now predominantly would say that cookies are deprecated, have gone away. So Google's decision today is actually an interesting and I think quite a positive one, certainly a positive one for Silverbullet, in the sense that they will give back that choice to consumers, but at a browser level. So rather than you having to click not allowed in terms of if you don't want to be tracked on a website, that will happen now at the browser level, not at the website level. That's their suggestion. That's what they've told us today in the news. Okay. That means that Google will effectively be falling in line with the kind of privacy standards that Apple already deployed and a large part of the industry. So that's a very positive move forward for Silverbullet, given the fact that we are all about consented data, all about first-party data that's about the customer. Why? Because that's what our clients want to use to get better marketing return on investment. So if you we always look through the lens of our clients, consumers, and then the broader ecosystem, and look at how we can adapt our clients' needs to the data that's available to them, so this today is actually a positive move forward and one that walks us towards a more consented first-party data, privacy-led world.
Yeah. And so in practice, how does that work, Dave? You open up Chrome, for example, will there be a pop-up saying, do you consent or not consent or accept or reject? Or
we don't know yet. It's the truth of the matter, Justin. Google haven't been clear about that. And I'm sure that will be an issue of them to discuss with regulators and the appropriate privacy standards that they'll have to meet. If you look at Apple, then they've gone as far as it to being default that you don't get tracked and you have to ask to be tracked. In essence, that's pretty much how it works. Therefore, Google will find a middle ground, I'm sure, between some of that. It'll certainly mean that a large number of consumers will naturally deprecate the cookie themselves, which is why I think this is such positive news. We see that if you look at the ad blocker market, might be say 30% already. People deciding to block ads in their browser. So if you take that as a benchmark, then 30% would be likely to not want to be tracked across the web. Let's be honest, from a consumer perspective, there's some benefits, but not a huge amount of benefits of being tracked across the web. Personalization is one, but there are so many other ways that we can provide brands to give you personalization using consented first-party data. That's what Silverbullet does for its clients. So you don't need a cookie for personalization per se. So there are other challenges, which are probably too complex for the conversation today, but fundamentally, what it will mean is that less consumers will want to be tracked, which means less cookies in the environment, which deprecates it by virtue of consumer consent. Therefore, we're already inexorably walking to a world where third-party cookies are at least not very important or less important, and certainly one where the majority of our brand customers and clients and consumers will be expecting better customer experiences using first-party privacy-led data, of which consented cookie data is. So we end up with more data to help our clients to get better bang for their buck in marketing.
Yeah. I quite like that. Do you know what's important? Like you say, Apple, I think you have to sort of give it permission to get tracked. So by default, they don't track, which is very good. Now, I don't know if Google will do that, but if they don't do that, I can see what's going to happen. I can see lots of people, maybe on social media and all that stuff, posting videos. If you don't want Google to track you, do this in your browser. So and I can see it'll be hard because people don't want to be tracked. I mean, generally, like I said, I always, if I get an option of accept all, reject all,
Yeah,
I hit reject all. So I can
right.
see there being lots of fallback on Google, pushback if they by default track you and they give you the option first and foremost, or you have to go in there and sort it out yourself. But yeah, because that's the way forward. Like you say, be honest with people and say we're not going to track you unless
Exactly.
you want us to track you. Yeah.
Correct. So I think, what we'll see is what it will have to be, one would assume, is that it has to be simple and transparent. And
Yeah.
that's what consumers want, transparency of the use of their data. Being tracked is not a problem if you consent to it. That's up to
Yeah.
you, the consumer. But, history says that most consumers don't want to be if they're given an option, to your point about reject or allow. It'll be simplified, one would imagine, depending on what Google present, but all of the indications are that we move to an Apple orientated or an Apple-like environment for all of the browsing environment on the open web, which means for consumers and for brands, which is the most important thing, that there are ways forward to join up the dots. Because what our clients ask us for, and we'll come to the announcements later, but we won 20 new clients in the first half of the year. All of our clients ask us to join the dots of all the data that's available to them in order to create a joined up clear proposition that enable them to target consumers in a meaningful way, right? Or their customers in a meaningful way and in a way that is expected. So all that customers really want is joined up data dots.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Like I say, some people are maybe getting the wrong end of the stick here, and reading this Google update and thinking, and worrying. But the proof is in the pudding. Let's go back to was it 15th of July? You announced contract wins and a working capital facility. Like you just said, 20 new contracts in the first half of the year.
Yeah.
That seems a lot.
It is. I mean, it's something we probably need to, trumpet more. We are growing well. We're growing well in the US. In our last report, we saw significant growth in the US. Over 70% of our business is US and global clients now. As you say, 20 new client wins in the first half. We've got a solid footing financially with a working capital facility. That's a rolling piece of working capital. So that gives us a really solid footing for the second half of this year and going into next. So we feel really confident about what we're doing. As I say, sometimes there can be an over-focused. 4D is a product that is an alternative to having to use cookies, for sure. But our overall business is also about first-party data and privacy. That's what we do, customer experience company, privacy first. And 4D will only be enhanced by more data being available to the contextual piece of work that we do. We can ship in more data. So that's only going to get more in demand, which is typified or is proven out by the growth that we've seen in 4D, over 80% growth last year, year on year. So, we feel really good about where we're heading. This Google news often sucks all the attention and can sometimes be misconstrued. Cookie deprecation is just one element. And I think we've talked about it before, Justin. It's just one element, one data element in a very big, rich ecosystem of data that is available, which is consented and good for customers' engagements by clients. So these are the Google thing often just sucks the energy out of the market a little bit and becomes a bit of a distraction, if I'm being honest. But it's really just the tip of the iceberg, and we have plenty of data that's available to us and exciting opportunities for 4D and the broader business.
Yeah, well, I think when you get sort of, like I say, big multinational companies trusting you to help them with their data and all that stuff. Like you said, notably one of the new contracts is with a global confectionery company. And so I suppose if it's global confectionery, not many of those around really globally.
No.
So worldwide mandate for data strategy. And also, so these contracts, nearly 70% of your target for the year.
Correct. So, we are well on track to management expectations. We, as I say, we hit the 6-month mark and we're 70% of our booked revenue. So, we feel comfortable with that and really excited by that because it gives us a solid foundation for 25 as well. Often most of our engagements are long-term recurring master service agreements with global brands and companies. They have multiple divisions and they have multiple brands and they have multiple geographical regions. So our growth over the last 4 years has been based on focusing on those brands. The complexity, Google's another example of the complexity that exists in this market, why we exist in the first place as Silverbullet, to help solve those problems and challenges that clients face. So we work with big global clients, we have an international footprint, and we have a good, strong growth opportunity with the clients we have, as well as new wins like the 20 new logos or 20 new clients and brands that we put into the new business hopper in the first half.
Yeah, and generally, at a top level, what is the market like for advertising in this kind of the sector at the moment?
Yeah, I think macro-wise, the advertising market's starting to come back a little bit after a fairly big dip in terms of tech spending, especially, or tech company spending. You see some of the bigger players in our ecosystem that are talking that up again in terms of tech spending coming back, some of the big holding companies. So that's interesting. We are definitely seeing the transformation anyway away from cookie, if there's one of a better description, to alternative means of advertising insights and targeting, like 4D provides contextual advertising targeting. So that shift has happened anyway. So we're seeing that growth anyway. So we see the shift in programmatic and digital advertising is also winning across. You see some of the Netflix results recently in terms of the shift from analog TV into programmatic or digital TV, CTV, connected TV. So that shift is coming. Our 4D product operates in that CTV environment as well as the open web with text. So we are a video company as well. So the macro trends for us in the digital advertising spends are very much in the favor of Silverbullet, and of course that overarching privacy first use of data. So spends are there. I forget off the top of my head, just but it's north of 700 billion of spend in the digital advertising environment forecasted over the next 12 months. So we have a significant pie, and frankly, being respectful to ourselves, we don't need a huge share of that pie. To be a very successful business, and we operate, as I said, 70% of our business with global clients and in the US market. So we're the biggest advertising market, I think, doing the right things, and our clients are certainly telling us we're helping them to do the things that they need to do.
Yeah, exactly. And explain the working capital facility if you could.
Yeah, sure. It's quite straightforward, really. Because of our growth, we have a good book of receivables, and we're able to secure working capital facilities off those receivables. So it's a very cost-efficient way for us to leverage our cash flow.
Excellent stuff. Well, Ian, listen, it's good to chat to you, and so you're doing very well. And sometimes it's a complex market, even for, like I said, companies who are in this space to understand what's going on, because it's always changing. Everything's evolving. But it's nice of you to come on and explain the complexities of it all, intricacies of how it works. And it's nice to you doing well. And your half-year results, have you announced those yet? They come out soon?
We'll do those. We traditionally have done those in September, Justin. So I think that's if you look backwards, then that'll give you an indicator of the kind of rhythm that we have as a business. We have our AGM 14th of August. So we're into the flow of that communication next. And I'm sure we'll update the market as soon as we have any interesting news as well.
Yeah, marvelous stuff. Ian, good to chat to you. Hopefully we catch up very soon. Thanks very much.
Appreciate it, Justin. Thanks.